Alright, so let's get started for the next class. So today our lesson is advanced techniques, but really what it is like all the miscellaneous tips and tricks that I have learned over the years that didn't quite fit into the other categories, so I'm just dumping it all into one. This is gonna be opinionated to a certain extent. There are certain things that I think works well for my writing. If you disagree, feel free to disagree. Feel free to try the exact opposite. Feel free to experiment. I think that's like the beauty of art, where you can try new things without like stressing, right? Like I'm not gonna look at your homework and be like, oh, you did it wrong, right? If it's good, it's good, right? If you're happy with it, I think that's important. All right. So with that in mind, let's get started. Okay. So let's look at this chapter. In the tumultuous battleground, bathed in the fiery glow of the sun, Darius locked eyes with his adversary Godfrey, their gazes aflame with unyielding determination. Swinging his sword in the air quickly, Darius ran forward quickly. The clash of steel resounded, echoing through the air as they engaged in a fierce duel of epic proportions. With every strike, their swords danced in a deadly symphony, suddenly weaving through the air with a mesmerizing grace. The clash of metal reverberated, causing the earth to tremble beneath their feet as their swords clashed. Sparks erupted like fiery embers, igniting the battlefield with an ethereal brilliance. Okay, what do you guys think of this um excerpt? Do you like it? Do you not like it? What if you like it, what parts do you like? If you don't like it, what parts do you not like? Using quickly twice irked me a bit. Yes. It's nice? Okay. Not enough choir and the epic music playing in the background. Okay. Good descriptions, okay? It's very grand. Alright. It does sound like a fairly epic fight. Okay, that's cool. Flashy but intense. Okay. So, one of the comments reading this, uh, in fact I wrote this, so it's meant to be bad. But basically I think my main complaint would be that it's very difficult to read. Did any one of you feel that way when reading this? Like, let's take a look at it. Do you feel like it's difficult to read, or was it actually quite easy to follow? I mean, it's okay to say it's easy to read. I think that's fine. I just want to get a feel. It's easy enough to follow. Okay, can. So you guys generally felt it was alright. Okay. I mean, that's perfectly fine. No, don't worry. You saw it as if it was shot by shot sequence. First sentence goes on for a bit. Overall, it's fine. All right, sure. But I'm gonna show you guys how we can make it easier to read. All right. So basically, this is like the idea of like clean writing. There will be a lot of self learning required. So if you go to the additional reading materials, like additional resources in the workshop material folder, there are a lot of things that I've linked in there that I will not be able to cover in the span of this lecture alone. But I will try to kind of give you like a brief overview of like the different techniques that you can start to pick up. And these are things that you can slowly learn, slowly practice over the next, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these techniques are stuff that I learned over the years, right? So take your time, self learn it in your free time, go for whatever you feel is the most interesting or applicable that you find. All right. Yeah. Okay. So I would have written a shorter letter, but I did not have the time. All too often, I think when we write, sometimes things just get dumped onto the page. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves it if it got like if it's effective, right? Um, yeah. Okay, wait. Let me see your comments. Okay, someone says it's the sort the previous story was the sort of writing that your eyes would glaze over trying to read. If the whole story was written like this, you would do it. You would just glaze. Yeah. So that's basically the idea. Yeah. So to go back to the quote, right? like sometimes what you're putting on the page might be verbose in a non-ideal way. Like I mean long doesn't mean bad, right? But sometimes if it's too long, but it doesn't serve a lot of purpose, right? There's such a thing as like talking so much but saying so little. And I can think of a few people that I've talked to who talk a lot but say very little, right? And you don't want your stories to be like that, right? You want to make your stories effective, right? You don't want, if it's a boring slog to go through your story, like you might throw some readers off. Yeah. So the idea of clean writing is that you want to make it easy for readers to go through your story smoothly. There are, when you write, there are things that you might do wrong, or like I wouldn't say it's wrong, but there are things that you could do that makes the reader slow down, and not in a good way. It's like the annoying kind of slow down, right? Like earlier, remember when we were talking about the scenes where certain scenes are meant to be slow, we use longer sentences, right? That's intentional, right? But sometimes, like in a fast-paced scene, people end up making it read very slowly. Where, like, imagine you're trying to read, you're like, you know that it's an action scene, but now you're just trying to read. Wait, sorry, where's the gun here? Okay, wait, which part of the room he's at? Sorry, the enemies were standing underneath the chandelier, or was it behind? Like, were they on the second floor? Like, if it gets messy, it slows down the reader, right? So that's an example of places where you don't want to slow down the reader, right? So you want to get readers through the story. So um, first tip: avoid difficult words. I think sometimes people abuse the thesaurus too much, right? It's like, you got, it feels like a sophisticated story. Uh, if you had to look it up in the dictionary, chances are your poor readers would have to look it up in the dictionary before they continue reading as well. Either that or they'll guess the meaning of the word, and that's not ideal. Get if you could use a word that kind of means mostly the same thing, uh feel free to change. Um yeah. Difficult word is fancy vocabulary. To a certain extent, yes. Like sometimes I would simplify things. So let's say let me Google for example. Right. So if I told you if I told you um Darius drank from a flute glass, right? Do you guys understand what I just said? Darius drank from a flute, flute, flute glass, right? You know that term? Oh, some people know. Okay, come, let me show you on screen. All right, here's a flute glass. It's a special kind of wine glass, right? For sparkling wine, right? If I said he sipped from the wine glass, that would make more sense. You see, if I said flute glass, you would have been held back, right? But there are certain cases where you do want to use the technical term, right? Because if I told you, oh, he double clicked the program to run the program, right? Versus he executed the hacking script, right? The first sentence, the first example sounds very amateur, right? Like the person doesn't actually know how to code, doesn't actually know how computers work. In the second example, he executed the script, right? It sounds more professional. It sounds like the author knows what's going on, right? Even though it's more technical. So I think it's kind of a balance, right? And let's say you really need to say it's a flute glass, right? Give me contextual clues. Say he sipped his wine from the flute glass. Then that makes more sense, right? Okay, someone says when you say wine glass, you think of a different kind of glass. Right. So you can actually, if you really need it to be a specific kind, use context clues to make it easier for the reader to understand so that they do not have to slow down to read your story. Does that make sense? You argue a bit if it's a bit pretentious, wouldn't it make sense? Correct. Then give them more clues. Tell them that it's wine, that there's wine inside it, right? If you just say he sipped from the flute glass, I might not know, right? But if you tell me he's in a fancy restaurant, the waiter served him wine in a flute glass, I would be able to infer. Yes. So figure it out. Again, right? These are not hard and fast rules. Feel free to experiment with it, right? Yeah, I think it's a challenge. It's a bit fun. Have fun. Okay, next one. Avoid repeating words unnecessarily. So I think someone noticed earlier that we use the word quickly twice in succession. That comes up in stories a lot. So what I usually do is there are word counters where they will count the number of times you use a specific word. I will sometimes look for it, use that to find like repeated words. Uh, if you use Pro Writing 8, I'm not sure about Grammarly. Grammarly might also point that out. But certain text editors will point that out, or while you are writing. While I'm writing, I also pay attention to words that I'm using too much. And I'll kind of use the thesaurus to help resolve it. So here's an example, right? I'm here early if you want to start early, right? We can change it, right? I'm here early if you want to start now. Um, Here's another more extreme example. He closed the door. It was close to closing time and he wanted to close the deal with the shopkeeper before everything closed up. This is outright abusing it, right? Oh my goodness, this is so annoying. Yeah. But, so why don't you guys try? How would you guys improve this sentence? Or yeah. Boring. Yeah, come up. I understand that it's boring. Alright, come up with how you would change these two sentences. Make it more readable. He shut the door. It was near to closing time. He wanted to seal the deal with the shopkeeper before time ran out. Yeah, exactly. Shut the door. It was nearing closing. Yeah, basically you guys got it. Okay, so pay attention. Sometimes these things happen. If you're not conscious, it will slip through and you will end up with repeated words. Okay, let's try another one. All right. Let me copy paste the slide so you guys can get a feel of it. Give me a second. I will take out the text. Okay, please do not make. Okay, read this. Please do not make staff or members of the public who are visiting uncomfortable. How was this? How's this? Does it parse? Is it easily? Okay, this is slightly different rule already. Staff are visiting. This sentence makes you uncomfortable. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think some of you guys are getting like, please do not cause discomfort to staff or members of the public. Ambiguous modifiers. It's basically the idea that sometimes when you write, you end up with very complex sentence structures, right? And sometimes when you think, that's what you like. That's basically how you think, right? Like, oh, please do not make the staff or members of the public who are visiting, comma, uncomfortable, right? Sometimes people do that. It does show up in stories. You could narrow it down to don't be offensive. You could, yes. This is Auntie Betty in Dutch using a callback to the wrong subject. Yeah. I don't think it's technically wrong. You could interpret it as please do not make bracket staff or members of the public who are visiting. Right? Please do not make people uncomfortable. Right? It's just that we specify the people to be this. Right? But it could be simpler. Yeah, sometimes you get like very complex sentence structures. We ideally try to avoid that. That will slow down the way people are like reading. I do go into that later. Actually, it shouldn't be here, but anyway. Yeah, please do not act in a way that makes the staff or members of the public uncomfortable. You could call them visitors. Yes. You see, there are a lot of ways to improve. Yeah. So just have fun with that. Yeah, just something to be conscious about. Alright, let's try another one. Remove redundant words. So this is something that comes up. I'm not sure if it's common, but I know within Singapore because we use like people who speak Chinese, right? There's when we say we return, right? 还给他, I give back to him, right? But we don't use that in English, right? We just say I return the money to him. We shouldn't say I return the money back to him. He rose from his seat. He rose up from his seat. You don't need these. His chair was made out of wood. You could say his chair was made of wood, right? Singlish, yeah. There are a few like this in Philippines English as well. Yes. Okay. So, in English you can cut most of these out. Be aware of that. His chair was carved out of wood. Yeah, that could work, right? Yeah. Yeah. Any questions with these so far? Because there are a lot to go through. Okay. No questions. Let's go on. Okay. Avoid filler words. Okay. So this is mildly polarizing a bit. I would say lean towards avoiding the filler words. Use them only if necessary. Example, he was very distressed versus he was distressed. In most cases, you could replace very distressed with just distressed. In most cases, I'm gonna caveat that. All right, agree, disagree. Right. Example, right? Sometimes you say he was very tall, right? Why don't you use a different word? If you really want to say that he's tall, tell me he towered over the crowd, or he was a head taller than me, right? So you don't need the very, right? You don't in here. You don't need to say very tall. Just tell me he towered over the crowd, right? Or I could see him over the crowd. Right. We were saying he quickly went to the station. He went can be changed to he went to the station. Yes. So some people there is a rule that says no adverbs. Not rule. Some people will say write without adverbs. So can we read this? Okay. Basically don't say she walked quickly to her next meeting, right? See, so you use quickly, you use very, right? You use very, unfortunately. So don't use these kind of words. That's their idea. Trim it. So rather than she smiled happily, take it out. She smiled. If you think it's important, right? Say she grinned, right? Unless it's for something like she smiled sadly, then you can keep it in. But otherwise, don't tell me she ran quickly. She dashed for it. She sprinted. Exactly, right? See, I'll never ever talk to him again, she said angrily. Take out the angrily. I'll never talk to him again, she said. Right? That's enough, right? Take out all these things. Adverbs in the wrong place. She watched as she ran meditatively. Yeah, so yeah, but this thing, you know what? I'll add this to the reading material so you guys can check it out. You won't say cut them out completely, don't repeat the information unless you need to reinforce it. Yes, which is why I said use them only if you need. I will put this article into the additional readings, alright? So you guys can check it out too. Article, right? Without adverbs. Yeah. Have fun, alright. These are super fun to check out. Like there's a lot to learn, I feel. Another example, he was practically late, just he was late. Right. There were two options, now he needed to make a choice. There were two options, he needed to make a choice. Yeah. Make sense so far? Let's agree, disagree? I would say get a feel of this. There is no hard or fast rule on when to use, when not to use. Get a feel of it, and in some sense, your choice on how much you want to use will kind of is part of your writer's voice, right? As a writer, you will have a style, you will have a feel, right? Some people will feel things when they read, right? These are techniques that you can tweak the way people feel when they read your stories. I think this is super important. Um, I, yeah, like I think if you're more aware, yeah, then it'll show. And I think that's the case for my stories as well, where people feel because I don't add a lot of filler words, it feels like they go through the story quite well, right? They don't feel like it was dragging on for too long. And in fact, they because of I reduce a lot of distance. I think I will talk about that later. Yeah. I took later one of the tips is improve directness, where you can bring the reader closer to the action. But that's part of your personal flavor of writing. Alright, let's try another one. Okay, improve readability. So readability goes with basically shorter sentences, simpler sentence structures, use less glue or sticky words, and try to imply things without explicitly describing. Okay, this is not go all the way, by the way. Please balance it out. Don't make it read like a children's book, like she went home, she cried. She said, I am so sad, right? That's a bit too far, right? Get a feel for it what you want, right? So here's one example, right? Because he wanted to avoid meeting her, he took the long way through the park, right? But it feels like, you could just put it down as he took the long way through the park because he wanted to avoid meeting her. Both of them have slightly different connotations, but let's ignore that for a second. Which one do you feel reads better? Which one do you feel flows? The latter one? Okay. A lot of people say the latter because it's the starting action first. The latter sounds better. Okay. So if yes, the latter sounds better, I do agree. What would be a use case of using the first sentence structure? Uh, you feel that the former would make sense if the reason is significant? Yes. How about the rest? What do you guys think? Why would you ever use the first sentence? Needs more emphasis? What needs more emphasis? The first one sounds like someone describing a situation. Yes. So let's say the earlier sentences are talking about his negative emotions and memories that he associates with her, right? He sat down, the moment he saw her, in his mind, he remembered all the times that she has lied to him, she has cheated on him, she has gaslit him. And because he wanted to avoid meeting her, he took the long way through the park. Does that make sense? Because you want to link the ideas together. Does that feel like it flows more now? Now that we had that context in the front. Okay, I see a bunch of yeses. That flows better. Okay, so don't follow the rule blindly. Figure out which ones make sense to follow. Learn learn your style, right? There is a way to do things. I think flow is so subjective, and it's really something that you vibe with as you write. I sound like an art student. Vibing. Yeah, but yes, it's really an artsy thing. Okay, let's try another one. All that was left was the books, right? You can change it to only the books were left. Right. Another one. He caught the door before it could hit the wall with a loud bang. Right. Change that, right? He caught the door before it slammed against the wall. Right. The bang didn't actually happen as well. Like the slam doesn't happen. So honestly, it's fine. You can take it out. Yeah. Makes sense? Okay. Yeah, writing is an art. What if this art is not the vibe? Yeah, basically. Alright, let's try one more. Alright. Improve directness. So I go into this a fair bunch earlier. Right. But basically take out the distance. Right. You could say people could tell that she was sad. Just take that out. She was sad. Right. All too often, because there's a protagonist, right, and we're going through third person, sometimes there is a tendency to make the protagonist experience everything. Like, oh, the protagonist looked up and saw the dark clouds in the sky, right? Take that out. See, there were dark clouds in the sky, right? Because when you put the main character saw this, right? Now the reader aren't experiencing the world for themselves. They're experiencing it through the protagonist, right? If you want something more visceral, don't tell me the protagonist saw that. Tell me there are that, right? Don't say he could smell like a stench in the air. Just say there was a stench in the air, right? There was this, there was that, like this, the wall blocked them. Like it's not he could see that the wall was blocking them. Just say the wall was blocking them. This can improve directness. It can make the reader feel like they are experiencing the world for themselves. Okay. What's one reason, or come up with reasons that you might want to use the first version, which is the protagonist saw this. Why would you? What are scenarios where you will try that instead? Limited first person point of view. Okay. Limited third person point of view. Yes and no. Even if it's limited, even if the character can see that there are dark clouds in the sky, I will still say there are dark clouds in the sky. Or if I want to show that he's looking, I will say he looked up. There are dark clouds in the sky. Right? It brings you closer. Or maybe he looked up and saw dark clouds in the sky. I guess. But I won't say he sees the dark clouds because it puts the distance. The first one, it feels more like sadness seems obvious to others. Oh, that's true. Yeah. People could tell that she was sad and she did nothing about it. Yes. Another reason I would do another reason I would put some distance between you and between the reader and the world through the protagonist if the protagonist is seeing something wrong. So rather than saying she is lying, right? I can say he thought that she was lying, or he could tell that she was lying, right? Maybe she's not actually lying. So I don't say she's lying. I'll say he saw that she's lying. He sees it, or he infers it, but he might be wrong, right? But I'm not gonna tell you that. I'm just gonna say he can tell that she's lying. She may not actually be lying. right? So these kind of things work pretty well for like unreliable narrators to a certain extent. You are having the protagonist like observe something that might not be there, right? But if you do if you are gonna do a lot of that, then I would just take that out entirely. So then I would just go with the second. So example, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys have watched movies where like the protagonist goes through a lot of things and then it turns out none of it was real. It's all in his head, right? But does imagine if it were written in a story, you wouldn't want it to be like he sees this, he sees that, he thinks that the person is stabbing him, and then he was stabbed, and then he woke up, right? No, you just say he got stabbed, and then he woke up, right? You don't say he sees this wall, then he goes there, and then he walks left, and then he walks right. No, he sees like there is a wall, right? There is an obstacle, and there is a person. You just say as if it's real, right? So again, it's a balance, right? How close do you want to bring the reader to the action versus how much of the lens do you want to make obvious that maybe the protagonist is seeing something, like you're making obvious that the protagonist is perceiving that. Does that make sense? I hope that's not too complicated. Yeah. Any questions? You can kind of see it. Okay, good. I was scared that my explanation was all over the place. Yes. Get a feel of it. I think those are very fun to experiment with. Um, those are sometimes very specific and sometimes very subjective. Okay. Any other questions? Come, let's show the questions before we look into even more techniques. How to best juggle? Honestly, the best way, like the only way to really tell is to put your writing in front of people and get people to tell you what they feel, right? You could, if you think there are two different ways to write something, write it in two different ways and ask someone, right? Which do you prefer, right? Or maybe not which do you prefer, right? Maybe your intention is not to make it easy to read, right? If it's very painful, if it's a maybe the scene you're writing is painful, right? Ask them which one they hate, which one makes them feel the most pain that they don't want to feel, right? And then you say, okay, that's good. Let's go with the painful one, right? Maybe don't ask them which one they like, right? Ask them which one makes them feel things, which one engages them, which one scares them the most, right? I think reading is a you like writing stories. You can't look at your story in the context of yourself, right? If someone else is to read your story, right, then you are creating a shared experience with the reader on the other end. So you are collaborating with them, right? So what like how you choose to express this is how like will kind of shape how the person on the other end experiences your world. Whether do you like, for instance, if we're looking at this, do you want a reader to experience her sadness through other people, right? The people around her? Or do you want the reader to experience the sadness through like through their own experience, right? And these are the things that you have to kind of think about as you write. And then like you don't really know unless you test it. Or you can make guesses, right? You can make guesses about as to what people will like, what people dislike, what people will feel, right? But if you really, really, really want to know, put it in front of people, ask them to read it. Because you are not the only person in the experience of the story. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go. Okay, someone's typing. Okay, good. Alright, good. Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go to other techniques, alright? Okay, show don't tell. I think we hinted at this in the very first lesson, and I think it's one of the golden rules that everyone tells you. You love this rule? Okay, that's good. So she had been crying, right? Don't tell me she's been crying. Tell me her eyes were puffy and red rimmed. Dried streaks ran down her face, leaving discolored patches on her makeup. Ew, you can feel. The rule isn't ironclad. Yes, we did cover that in our first lesson. Do you guys remember what I said in the first lesson? You have a love-hate relationship with this rule because you're guilty of breaking it despite knowing how important it is. Yes. Okay. Let's try. See if you guys remember what we covered in what I talked about in the very first lesson. Alright. When should you tell instead of showing? Exposition. Not really true. It depends. You can still show exposition, I feel. Okay. It's so one of the places I would use it is when it starts to slow down. The problem with show is that it slows the reader down, right? And if you are slowing the reader down through a particularly boring section of your story, you probably don't want to do that, right? So example, Harry Potter is a great example of that. Harry Potter, he has he goes through some interesting class, right? Maybe he's sitting in class and Professor Snape's turn to this, and then suddenly like he's talking to Ron and Professor Snape, do you have something to share with the class, Potter? Right? And then like 20 points from the Gryffindor, right? So these kind of things, like, it's an experience, right? And so J.K. Rowling will take the time to let you experience, right? But then there will be a few boring classes in between. And what she does is she'll be um, like divination class happened, like couldn't end fast enough. So Harry was happy when he was finally out into the sun and able to play Quidditch again. And then he practiced for a bit before he headed back to the dorms to do homework with Ron. And then suddenly you are in the dorms, and then Ron is complaining about his homework, and then Harry Potter is just like, oh, why don't we fake the answers? And then they start making up stuff, and then they laugh about it, right? See, so notice how like the story will skip you through the boring parts, right? Because not everything needs to be experienced in full high definition, full HD, right? The boring parts, let's skip that. Let's just tell the reader what happens, and then we skip them to the good parts. Make sense? Agree, disagree? I will use telling when the portions of the story becomes too slow. I will skim over them and I will not subject the reader to that. Because if it's boring to you, it's gonna be boring to the reader as well. Like, so just skip it. Save both yourselves like the effort, right? Like save your suffering. Yeah, straight up telling is pragmatic, but it's also dry if used too much. Use with reason, right? I mean the same way, like the opposite also happens, right? Yes, telling can feel dry, right? But showing can be too long-winded, right? So you gotta figure out how to balance this, right? Again, if you're not sure, give it a read, put it in front of people, figure it out. All right. Let's move on. Rule of threes is also another one that I like to play around with. Uh, Basically saying I came, I saw, I conquered. Right? So there's like kind of like three things that he did. Like that he says he did. Right? Three is usually just right. Like it feels good. Sometimes if I come up with like two things, I will come up with a third one. Example, right? I miss his face, his eyes, his lips. Right? It's gonna feel very different from I miss his face and his eyes. Right? It feels it feels okay, but it feels almost like prose-ish if I say I miss his face, his eyes, his lips. Right? There's almost like a cadence to it when you read it. Does that make sense? Do you feel the vibes? The rule of three. Yeah. There's a delicate balance to strike there. Because repeating words can get you annoying. Yes. So obviously, like your entire story should not be like three things. Like, I think you need to figure out how best to balance it out. But that's honestly like that's something for you to figure out as well. But yeah, something about it bothers you a little. Don't bothers you a little. Just don't overuse it. Yes. Balance it out, balance it out. All right, these are just concepts that I'm gonna introduce it to you guys. Remember what I said at the start, right? You guys are gonna have to do a lot of self-learning. You guys are gonna have to experiment to get a feel of what you're comfortable with. I use this a bunch in my stories. If you read it, you might notice it from time to time. I love this concept a lot. Yeah. Okay, there are also subtle differences when you choose your words. So not everything in the thesaurus just because it's in the same category means it's the same thing. Example, right? He licked his lips excitedly versus he licked his lips, oh my goodness, tongue twisters, in anticipation. They are both technically the same in meaning, but are the vibes the same? What do you feel about the left one and the right one? The one feels like he's eagerly waiting for food to be served. Left one feels too generic. Yeah. The right one just feels better. Excitedly makes you think of a lot of rapid licks. Anticipation sounds nervous. Okay. Interesting. Left one sounds like he's doing it constantly. Right one sounds like he's using it to take the edge off. Right. So these things are very interesting, right? There are very subtle things. And maybe if you read in the story and you saw he licked his lips excitedly, you would not have given it a second look, right? But if I put these two sentences side by side, suddenly you feel like, huh, maybe this works better in the story than this, right? One might work better. But that's the thing, when you write a story, you're not gonna see all the options that you're gonna write with. You're just gonna see the one that you just written, right? And then if you write this, you might not see that you could have written the other one. Does that make sense? So the trick here is to look at your words and see if there are any subtle meanings, right? Subtle meanings that you might be leaving out or that you might be unintentionally putting into your story that you're not aware of. This is very fun. This is a very active form of writing because you can't just write what you're thinking. You have to ask yourself, is every single word I write intentional? All right, let's look at a few more. All right. So be careful of word associations. He was suspicious. Do you guys feel anything when I say this sentence? What's the first thing you think of? He was suspicious. Someone here is gonna say it. Untrustworthy, what did he do? Oh, okay, interesting. He was suspicious. Come, what's the first thing you think of, guys? Is he the one being suspicious, or is he thinking, oh, okay. Wow, I'm surprised no one. Okay, come, let me show you guys what I think of. TF2 spy comes to mind. Oh my goodness. So someone did. You guys did suspect. I saw someone said I suspected. You guys knew it. You didn't want to be the one to say it. See, I knew. I knew it. All right. Jax Decker to the lot. Okay. Do you see that me using that word instantly kind of triggered that vibes, right? It's almost like you're at a loss for words. Oh my goodness, you guys are funny. Okay, do you see what I mean? There are word associations that we need to be careful of. Does that make sense? Right? So this kind of ties in with the earlier rule of like be careful of like choosing your words to have like the subtle differences. Sometimes using the word suspicious can mean something, right? That you might not, if it's gonna be a very serious story, you might want to avoid the word suspicious. I don't know. Maybe you can find something else. Maybe you say he looked around, like with like I don't know. What's the furtive glances? I don't know how to pronounce that. If you said he was sus, I would have thought of that. This is close enough. Some people would be thinking of it. It depends on how close you are to like meme culture as well. Um. Okay. Here's another one. Here's another example. Right. Like, imagine this guy is depressed. Right. He comes home and he doesn't even bother to turn on his apartment lights. He just lays down on the couch. And then he says to himself, "Hello, darkness, my old friend." Does it sound serious? Can you take him seriously? No, you can't. Why? Why you can't you take it seriously? Right. Because yes, exactly. Like people keep using that song in the memes, right? Too busy thinking of the song. Yeah, and exactly, right? So be careful, right? If he intended to be joking about it, then sure. Yeah, but that's the thing, like it's no longer serious, right? And I think that's kind of like you have to think about what's the current, so when you're writing, think about what the current situation and associations are. Language is very, very like dynamic. It will evolve over time, right? So I mean, I'm not asking you to future proof your stories because you never know when word meanings. Like someone brought up the term citrusy, right? Citrusy now has a different meaning, right? Um, things change over time, and so like over time, maybe something in your story will be offensive in future. Maybe using the word gay, like oh that's so gay, will be a bad term in future. I don't know, right? But it's okay. Just make sure that when you're writing for now, make sure like avoid all the weird associations. Yeah. Okay. Another here's some other examples. Here's not as like not as funny, I guess. But like let's try that, right? Her dress was a lilac color versus her dress was a great purple color versus her dress was an amethyst color. It's kind of the same color, right? All of them are like purple-ish, right? Which one? What are the different vibes? Which one feels elegant? Which one feels, what are the different feels you get from each of the descriptions? Yeah, I do understand that those are different like slightly different colors, but what's your association, right? Amethyst feels more elegant. Okay. Lilac feels softer. Okay. Lilac sounds standard. Amethyst sounds regal. Grape sounds edible. Okay, so lilac casual. Grape purple is playful. Amethyst is elegant. Yes. So I will intentionally change the color of clothes, of objects, of furniture to make things feel a certain way, right? If the clothes in my mind was green and I realized there is no good description for green that fits well with the vibes, I will change it to blue, I will change it to red, I will find a description that makes you feel a certain way about the thing. I mean, I could just call it a purple dress, right? But a purple dress doesn't have the same vibe as an amethyst colored dress or a great purple dress or a lilac dress. All of them have different vibes. I think if you play around with this, you will have very expressive stories. Does that make sense? Are you guys, do you guys feel like your minds are being open, like how you know every single word can bring about a different vibe? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Alright. I love this technique. I kind of discovered it over time where I found that using certain words just gave me different vibes, and I was like, I feel powerful. Yes, I use this a lot in my stories. It's how I make it very engaging. It's how I make you feel vibes that you don't even know where it comes from. It's all the subtle things. It's in the colors. It's in the word. It's the use of the word excitedly versus in anticipation. All of them have different things. Okay, let's try another one. The stain was the wine red versus the stain was blood red. In fact, both colors I would even argue that they're the same color. But do you see the difference? Right, when you're using blood red, it feels so visceral. Okay, let's. Okay, one of these was an accident. One of this is murder. Oh dear. Yeah. Okay, they have different vibes. Alright, just be careful of the vibes you give when you describe stuff. I think sometimes that like people use the wrong word. Like I understand that it's a pale yellow green, but if you call it a vomit colored dress, I am not gonna have very good impressions of the lady wearing the dress. Right? So please don't call it a vomit colored dress unless that is your intention. Like yeah, so be careful, right? Yes. Okay, the next rule, this is the last one that I'm gonna go through today. Uh you can personify abstract nouns. This one can feel very interesting. Like fear strangled him and left him gasping for air. Um okay, so strangled and gasping are kind of tied in together, right? But instead of a person strangling him, we use fear, right? These are very colorful ways to evoke more emotions in your story, in your descriptions. If you can find ways to do it, just throw them in, sprinkle them. Oh, it makes stories taste so good. You know, it's like the spice in the stories. You love lines like that. Oh man, me too. Personification is one hell of a technique. Yeah, but oh, it's so good. I do throw that around in my stories as well. I love it. Oh my goodness. These are the kind of okay. So throughout the story, you know what? Let's leave that to them. But yeah, okay. Let's look at more. I'm not gonna go into all of them again. There's no time to go through everything. I'm just gonna list down stuff that you can Google. Allegory is when like when you represent one thing. Yeah, you're trying to represent something else in your story. This one is usually for like very metaphorical stuff, kind of ties in. one thing means the other. Symbolism, imagery are kind of related, where you use like existing symbols to mean things in your story. Example, right? A character walks into a large hall with a high ceiling and a statue in the middle. Cool, alright. But if I told you he walks into the sanctuary of a church and in the center, right, it's like a statue of Jesus, but it's cracked, it's broken, worn down over time. Like the stained glass windows of the church were broken, right? Like half the panes are missing. Like sunlight streams through like the dusty air. Right? How does that feel? Right? Like you are touching symbols, you're touching like some aspects of religion, you're touching like this broken thing, you're combining different themes together. It feels more visceral than he walks into the dusty hall, right? Or the ruined hall. Agree, disagree? I mean, religion aside, right? You could use, if you could find like symbols, imagery from other places, that you can borrow some of these vibes. These are very effective ways to evoke emotions, right? Without having to take the time to describe it, right? If I told you there's a pentagram on the floor, right? You can already imagine what color it is. Okay, I tell you now, there's a pentagram on the floor, right? What color is it? What is it? It's okay, it's red color, alright. How was it drawn in? Is it with chalk? Is it with paint? What do you think it is? It's in blood. Okay. Think of the floor. Alright. What's the floor material? Like, is it like what's it made out of? In fact, what's the whole room made out of? Okay, cobblestone. Yeah. Marble, crack, walls are made from stone brick. Yeah, I see it. You thought of a gold pentagram, but then it flashed to blood red on the wood floor. See, if I told you, oh, there's a pentagram on the floor, okay, but let's go with your idea, a gold pentagram. He walked into the office building, right? It's a white marble floor, but in its middle was inlaid like gold, right? Gold in the shape of a pentagram. How does that feel now? What vibes do you get from this room? Manicured, clean. But what kind of vibe that ties in with the pentagram? Doesn't it feel very sinister? Doesn't it feel like something is wrong, something doesn't sit well, that there's a clash? It feels ominous. The CEO is definitely a demon worshipper hiding in plain sight. You see what I mean? Like, you can take imagery, you can tie this in, and it feels so powerful, right? You can feel things already. I literally described the room. I did not describe the lighting. I don't tell you what the characters are feeling. I don't tell you if it's crowded or not. In fact, there's nothing that should give you vibes. But still, with such little description, right, we can throw in such visceral emotions. It sparks imagination, right? So all these kind of things are like fun to try out. So Google some of these terms, experiment with what you can do. I think it will be very this will be very fun, right? Make sense? Any questions? Okay. Let's go through one more. Alright. Okay. Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. Picasso. Alright, this is one of the things that I think I covered in my like very first lesson. Okay, just remember that, like, for instance, rules, right? Avoid repetition, right? Some people say don't repeat, right? Like earlier we say don't use quickly twice in a row, right? But we can, right? So we're gonna take the repetition, we're gonna put in the rule of threes, right? He liked her dress. He liked the way she looked at him. He liked the way she tilted her head as if to say hello. And maybe one day he would come to realize he liked her. Right? How does this feel? Right? We're taking that repetition and then we're throwing it at you. And we take the repetition, he liked, and then like he liked her. Like it, don't like it. It's like people are like, oh, I don't like it. I cry. Why he likes her? I don't know. Maybe. Way too much repetition. Fair enough. Yes to the emphasis. Yes. This is something I would be comfortable with using, but if you're not comfortable with that, then it's for you to find a balance, right? It's for you to find what you feel, right? But I think it's okay to break the rules sometimes. It's poetic. I was going for that. If you guys feel that way, then that's good. If you don't, that's fine. I'm sure you can think of your own examples which will be better. Yeah, but don't be afraid to break the rules. I think I want you guys to explore. I want you guys to find. That's why I'm also not gonna be. I try not to. I don't want to be the one to look at your homework and say you wrote this wrong, right? I even if I give feedback, I will try to do like in the form of like I feel this from that. Like when I read this part, I feel this. I personally would do this, but it's up to you. I mean I'm too lazy to tell you they did it wrong. It leads into a whole argument. Okay. So any question? I think we've been opening out a lot of questions. We did a lot of question checkpoint. But any last questions before we go to the homework? You're good. Alright. Sure. Okay. So take home exercises for this week. We'll just take a short story, rewrite it with better writing techniques. Feel free to use whatever you learn. Feel free to look at the additional readings, learn more stuff. But let me actually show you guys the homework. So basically, I wrote more like I just told ChatGPT to write me a terrible story, right? Which is like kind of like the thing you saw earlier. Uh, it's very bland. I don't like it. Someone said like if the story went on like this, you will glaze over it. Yes. Alright, this entire story is meant to make you glaze over it because it's so terribly written. Alright. So this is where you guys come in, alright? Rewrite it in the space below. Make it better. Oh good, ChatGPT wrote it. You won't feel bad about wrecking it. Go for it. You like it, you just copy paste it at the bottom. It's like, I think it's perfect. We're good. Yeah, you like the assignment. Okay, that's good. Sounds like a challenge. Very good. All right, so that'll be your homework. Just take this, make it better. All right. You guys have learned a lot, hopefully. I hope this is interesting. I hope that, look at some of the techniques, find ways to incorporate that into the story. And then we will see you guys next week. Look, we're done. We're done with lesson 8. So 4 more lessons left and we'll end. We'll come to the end of the workshop. How are you guys feeling so far? Thanks for the lesson. Hey, no worries. You're happy that you made it to this one. Yeah. Oh, why the sad emoji? Thanks for the cost. Hey, no worries. I think the cost is for me as much as it is for you guys. I did it on a whim. I'm like, I wonder if I'm competent enough to host the workshop. How is the experience of outlining? I'm curious. How's the experience of teaching? I'm curious as well. And that's like, it turned into a whole thing. And I'm like, oh, next thing you know, I have like weekly commitments. Teachings are valuable. Thank you. Gonna be sad when this is done because it's been so fun. Oh no. Yay to no mandatory writing. It's never been mandatory. Yeah, but I mean, I hope after the course, like, you guys do some writing as well. Oh my goodness, don't just like, oh, I'm done, like, I'm free, no more writing. All right, any other last things for me? before we end off for today, you wanna use this for project? Wait, wanna use what, like writing, like the knowledge that you've learned? Yeah. Okay, that's good. I do hope that you guys don't like, this is not the end of your writing journey. This should be the beginning. You've been using the writing exercises to further your own stories. Okay, that's good to hear. Like I think like that's my goal as well. Like my goal is not to ramble to an empty wall, because if I really wanted to, I could do that. I feel like if I can be a part of the inspiration that gets you guys to write, then that's good. Right. I think too often we turn into mindless zombies of work, go home, sleep, and then rinse and repeat. Like, if writing can spice it up, then let's enrich our lives, right? Alright. Nothing else. Let's end off here. I'll leave you guys to the weekends and have a good day. Bye bye.